Hello friends, I am Arpit and I am here with today's analysis. Today is 27th of November and we are going to deal with 5 very important topics which are in news. Don't be afraid by the number of topics. Most of them are factual and very important. Here we have two exercises, military exercises. One is Vajra Prahar, which is done between India and US. The special forces of the military, they do it. Then next is Austrain. This is between Australia and India. This exercise started in 2022, that is last year. This year's edition is the second edition, and Gorkha rifles from India have gone to Australia for this exercise. Last year this was conducted in India, in Rajasthan. Then next topic we are going to study is humanitarian pause in Gaza. Now this humanitarian pause has been brokered by Qatar, Egypt, USA between Israel and Hamas. This is a temporary pause where Hamas has agreed to release 50 hostages held by it of Israel, and Israel has agreed to release around 150 hostages and prisoners held by it. These hostages are going to be released in batches, and there are full chances that this, I would say, humanitarian pause extends beyond 4 days, because as of now it has been agreed that this humanitarian pause is for 4 days. Now during this humanitarian pause, the humanitarian aid organizations and all, they will also be very active in providing humanitarian aid and assistance to the people. There will be some easing of the restrictions which has been levied by Israel for trade to the residents of Gaza, like food supplies and all, they will be given to Gaza. Now if this 4 days humanitarian pause goes well, goes as per plan, it can be extended, and its extension can further lead to further betterment of the situation over there in Israel and Gaza. So that is something which we can be hopeful of. Then next is Global Digital Public Infrastructure Repository. Now Prime Minister of India has announced that we are creating this repository. MeitY, Ministry of Electronics and Information Technology, has developed this repository. This was agreed to by the G20 leaders when the G20 summit was there, that we will create this repository where the global best practices of digital public infrastructure will be there, and anyone can take help from here whatever they want. Actually, this was the Gandhinagar Declaration where they announced this, and India has now developed this repository where there are around 54 DPIs from all across the world. Out of 54, 12 DPIs are from India, digital public infrastructure from India, and around 16 countries have contributed in these 54 DPIs repository. So this is like this. Then Social Impact Fund. This is again related to this topic only, but this Social Impact Fund is a fund which has been envisaged by India, and what is the purpose of this fund? The purpose of this fund is to help the global south countries. Global south means developing countries and underdeveloped countries of Asia, Africa and South America to adopt digital public infrastructure. If they are struggling financially to adopt these kind of systems, India is going to help them adopt this, and for that purpose India has created this fund, Social Impact Fund. So by this Social Impact Fund, India is definitely going to have a diplomatic impact also over them, or I would say India is going to leverage or extend its soft power on the global south. Now, exercise Vajra Prahar. The Vajra Prahar 2023 exercise, it happened in Umroi, Meghalaya. This is an annual exercise. Last year's version was in Himachal Pradesh. It is an exercise between the security forces or special forces of USA and India. Special forces are forces under the Indian Army and US Army respectively. Now, we need to understand that why these joint exercises are conducted. There are multiple reasons. One such reason is to establish interoperability. Interoperability means we come to know the standard operating procedures of each other, so that in times of joint operations, we are able to, conduct those joint operations smoothly. At times, UN also mandates, because UN, under the peacekeeping missions, forces from different countries are deployed. And if the forces already know how each other operates, then, it becomes easier, and the operation becomes more effective. So, one, to establish interoperability. Second, to share best practices with each other. Like in this case, US Special Forces might have developed a special practice which we have not developed, and vice versa can also be true, that we have developed a special practice which US forces have not developed. So we can share those best practices with each other. At times, we will be facing common enemies like terrorists. So these kind of exercises will be beneficial at that time. So let us look into the first, that is exercise Vajra Prahar. Indo-US Joint Special Forces exercise Vajra Prahar 2023 commenced at Joint Training Node, Umroi, Meghalaya. About Vajra Prahar, joint exercise conducted between Indian Army and the US Army Special Forces. Special Forces are a special, I would say, contingent which have special trainings. They have that commando level trainings, and it was the Special Forces which went into Pakistan for surgical strikes after the Uri attacks. It aims at sharing best practices and experience in areas such as joint mission planning and operational tactics. So we learn with each other, and if there is a situation where both Indian Army and the US Army, or Indian Special Forces and the US Special Forces, have to conduct a joint operation, let's suppose against the terrorist, then we should be easily able to do that. We should be able to communicate, we should be able to understand that what is going to be the plan, how should be the standard operating procedure and such like. Now Vajra Prahar 2023, this is the 14th edition of Vajra Prahar which is happening in Umroi, that is Meghalaya. The US contingent is represented by personnel from 1st Special Forces Group of the US Special Forces. Indian Army is represented by Special Forces personnel from the Eastern Command. The first edition was conducted in 2010 of this exercise. 13th edition, that is the last edition, this one is the 14th. 13th edition was conducted in Bucklow, MP. HP, Himachal Pradesh. Okay, at the Special Forces Training School. The current edition is being conducted in Umroi Cantonment, Meghalaya, from 21st November to 11th December 2023. So it is, I would say, a 20-day affair. It is also a platform to enhance interoperability and strengthen defense cooperation between the armies of India and the United States. So these are some explicit reasons which we have discussed: interoperability, sharing best practices. At times, geopolitics is also involved in these exercises, or geopolitics is reflected from these exercises. Like for example, India's growing proximity with USA was not liked by Russia, and Russia actually started a military exercise with Pakistan at that time. It was, I think, 2017-18. So this clearly reflected Russia's, I would say, discontentment with India's growing proximity with USA. So here geopolitics is reflected. So things like these are also happening, but these are not explicit reasons for exercises to happen. These are some implicit reasons. Russia will never say that I am doing this exercise with Pakistan because India's growing proximity with USA is actually disturbing me. No, it will not say like this. It will say that, like we do exercises with other countries, we are doing with Pakistan also. What's the harm in doing this? So it is like this. Exercise Austrain. Austrain, as the name suggests, between Australia and India. This exercise is very, I would say, late. It started in 2022, last year. Last year it was conducted in India, and it was decided that 1 year the edition will be in India, the other year the edition will be in Australia, like this. So last year, since the edition was in India, it was conducted in Rajasthan. Now this year, this edition is in Australia. Objectives: of this exercise, same which I told you with respect to Vajra Prahar, or for that matter any military exercises we do. Establish interoperability, share best practices, learn new tactics, deepen military to military ties, all these things are there. So let us look into the details of Austrain. It was instituted in 2022 and the first edition was conducted in Mahajan, Rajasthan. It is planned to be an annual training event to be conducted alternatively in India and Australia. Aim: foster collaborative partnerships, share best practices between the two sides. 2023 Austrain exercise. This year's exercise is going to be happened in Perth, Australia from November 22nd to December 6th, 2023, and this is also going to be a 14-15-day affair. The Indian Army contingent comprising 60 personnel from the Gorkha Rifles will take part in this exercise. Exercise will also promote interoperability while undertaking multi-domain operations in urban and semi-urban terrains. And this is in line with the United Nations chapter on peacekeeping operations. The joint exercise will promote the exchange of ideas and jointly rehearse tactics, techniques of each other so that interoperability is established. We come to know how they operate, they come to know how we operate. And a middle ground is reached that if we and you are there in a joint operation, this is how we are going to operate. The exercise will also help in promoting understanding between the two militaries and further strengthening defense cooperation between the two countries. So recently we've covered 2+2 dialogue with Australia, where defense minister and the external affairs ministers have met. So defense minister means deepening ties, and these are some of the ways in which defense ties are deepened. Next topic is humanitarian pause in Gaza. Humanitarian pause is basically not a ceasefire. Ceasefire is, nobody fires indefinitely. But here in a humanitarian pause, a timeline is fixed and the timeline is 4 days. However, I would say clause has been added that this can be extended by beyond 4 days. What are basically the elements of this humanitarian pause in Gaza? Release of hostages by both the parties, that is Israel and the Hamas. Israel will release around 150 hostages and prisoners which has kept in its prisons. And on the other hand, Hamas will release 50 Israelis which it took as hostages in the October 7th attack on Israel. And 50 hostages among or out of 240 known hostages which Hamas has taken will be released. However, this is going to extend if things go well. Apart from release of hostages, humanitarian aid and assistance will be provided to the people over there, especially in the Gaza Strip, where electricity has been cut off, food supplies have been cut off. Things are very, I would say, disturbed over there. So international humanitarian organizations, they will be active and they will be giving food aid to the people over there. So this is I would say a step in the right direction. If everything goes well, this can be extended. And this extension of humanitarian pause can also lead to the resolution of conflict. Let's be hopeful at least. So as of now, we have this humanitarian pause. Humanitarian pause can be extended. If it gets extended, let's be hopeful. Things can be better over there. So let's get started with this. Israel and Hamas have agreed to a humanitarian pause in fighting in Gaza. This was agreed 50 hostages to be released by militant group Hamas in exchange for 150 Palestinians held in Israeli prisons. This humanitarian pause was brokered by Qatar, Egypt and the United States of America. The pause will last for 4 days subject to extension, and this is where I am very hopeful. Now, how will it get extended? 50 hostages will not be released at once, or 150 hostages will not be released at once. They will be released in batches. Now, if things go well, they are being released in batches, then on the basis of that, extension can be done. What is humanitarian pause? The United Nations defines a humanitarian pause as a temporary stop to fighting for the sole purpose of humanitarian aid. These pauses typically have a specific time frame and are limited to a particular area where aid activities are happening. Humanitarian pause simply provides some relief amidst the relentless hostilities with aim to help civilians in distress. Now, this is not a ceasefire. Ceasefire is you stop fighting. And if a ceasefire is implemented, there's no timeline in that. It is assumed that it is indefinite. But here it is temporary and a specific geography is also defined. However, in this humanitarian pause for 4 days, the time frame has been defined, which can be extended, but we have no clarity as of now on the geography that where it has been implemented. That has to be studied or that has to be looked into when it starts. This humanitarian pause was agreed upon on 22nd of November. But the start date of it, let's see when it happens and when it gets extended. We are not so clear about it right now. Now, the key highlights of the deal. First is the prisoner swap. Under the deal, two sides agreed on to a 4 days truce so that 50 women and children under the age of 19 take hostage could be freed. This will be in return for 150 Palestinian women and teenagers in Israeli detention. The women and children, women and teenagers, these people are given preferences in any conflict situation because these are the most vulnerable people. The 50 hostages among about 240 taken by Hamas in their October 7 raid on Israel are expected to be released in batches. So 50 only out of 240 will be released in batches. And this release, this pause can be extended a day for each additional batch of 10 hostages released. So it will be the extension. We're talking about that it can be extended beyond 4 days. The extension will be indexed to the release of prisoners. So for every 10 hostages released, the extension will be there. This is the condition kept. Implementation of the deal. The International Committee of Red Cross will work in Gaza to facilitate the release of the hostages. They will be transported through Egypt. Now, if I draw a rough map of Israel, here is Gaza Strip. It is just a rough map. Here is Egypt. This is the Sinai Peninsula of Egypt. And Egypt is the only country which shares boundary with Gaza apart from Israel over here. Israel is over here. This is Gaza. So prisoners or these hostages will be released via Egypt. They will enter into Israel like this. It will happen. During the truce, trucks loaded with aid and fuel are expected to cross into Gaza. In Gaza, 2.3 million people have been running out of food and many hospitals have shut down in part because they no longer have fuel for their generators. So, this is happening. So, let's be very much hopeful in this aspect. Then, the Global Digital Public Infrastructure Repository. Digital public infrastructure is a crucial element for development of any country in the present day world. Does India have digital public infrastructure? Yes, India has well developed digital public infrastructure now. What is digital public infrastructure? Digital public infrastructure is that infrastructure which is open for the public, which benefits or which aims to benefit the public, and it is hosted on a digital platform. Like for example, Aadhaar is the backbone of the digital public infrastructure in India. I would say DigiLocker, where you can store your documents, your I would say certificates and all. An example of, I would say, digital public infrastructure. Or the COVID app, which every one of us used during COVID for getting vaccinated and all, getting our certificates over there. An example of digital public infrastructure. E-governance, another example of digital public infrastructure. So almost every sector in the government has been digitalized. That infrastructure which the government has created is for the public. That is why digital public infrastructure. Many countries across the world are asking India's help for their digital transformation or their digital transitions because they are struggling. And for that purpose, India has come up with this Global Digital Public Infrastructure Repository. Repository is a collection of best practices not only from India but from 16 other countries. There are 54 DPIs which are over here, and countries all across the world, if they want to know, or if they want to adopt any digital public infrastructure, they can come here, they can adopt that, and things are posted along with the source code over here wherever possible. This global digital public infrastructure repository was envisaged during this year's G20 summit. And the G20 leaders agreed that we will be hosting our respective DPIs on this repository. The 54 DPIs from 16 countries are part of G20, have been hosted as of now. Out of 54 DPIs, 12 DPIs are from India. So let us look into the details. Recently, the Prime Minister of India announced the launch of two India-led initiatives: the Global Digital Public Infrastructure Repository, and second is the Social Impact Fund. The Social Impact Fund is a fund which aims to deliver DPI to the Global South. The Global South are developing and underdeveloped countries of Asia, Africa, and South America. Now, what are these people? Means obviously they are not well off, they are developing. They struggle in adopting digital public infrastructure. Financially, if they are struggling, so this particular fund will help or will bridge the gap for their funding. Now about GDPIR, it is created by Ministry of Electronics and Information Technology. It is a comprehensive resource hub pooling essential lessons and expertise from G20 members and guest nations. Primary aim is to bridge knowledge gap in the choices and methodologies required for the design, construction, deployment and governance of DPIs. Means a repository of DPIs from all across the world, from 16 countries across the world, and anyone can take help from this repository. The GDPR showcases the information in a standardized format from countries and organizations that have developed DPIs at scale. Governance frameworks are also there. Currently, GDPR features 54 DPIs from 16 countries. Now, these are the DPIs from India in GDPIR, that is Global Digital Public Infrastructure Repository. So, UPSC can ask a question in prelims. So, you should be aware about these 12 DPIs which has been hosted by India in the GDPIR. So, you have to memorize this. This is completely factual. And the last is Social Impact Fund. Now, as I told you that if the Global South countries, they are struggling with adoption of digital public infrastructure, so India by itself solely has launched this fund. This fund is basically comprising $25 million. And what this fund will do, it will help these Global South countries to adopt digital public infrastructure if they are struggling financially. So it will bridge the finance gap for the Global South countries to adopt digital public infrastructure. Now, it is envisioned as a government-led multi-stakeholder initiative to fast-track DPI implementation in the Global South. Now, DPI is very, very much important for eradication of poverty, for overall development. Now, why? See, an example, if I tell you, Jandan Yojana, bank accounts opened. These bank accounts linked with Aadhaar, the backbone of DPI. These bank accounts also linked with mobile, which is also kind of a digital public infrastructure. It is called as Jandan Aadhaar Mobile Jam Trinity. Now with this Jam Trinity, we were able to transfer the subsidies directly to the bank accounts of the people, to the eligible beneficiaries. Second of all, we were able to identify, the government was able to identify that who are the eligible beneficiaries. And in this pursuit, government found out that there were 10 crore people who did not exist, but subsidies were being released on their name. And where the subsidies were going? Babuji's, Netaji's corruption. So we weeded out, fake beneficiaries or ghost beneficiaries. Second of all, we were able to identify the beneficiaries. We were able to deliver, funds to them directly in their bank accounts. Earlier, those funds were not reaching them, the eligible beneficiaries, in that amount which were released by the government. So now the people, the poorest of the poor, have more money in their hands. They generate demand. Rural economy will be flourishing. This is something which is actually helping in eradicating poverty, and this has been reflected in multiple indicators in India, like Niti Aayog's multidimensional poverty index. So it is like this. This fund will offer financial support to provide upstream technical and non-technical assistance to countries in developing DPI systems. So technical assistance will be provided and non-technical assistance will be provided. And for both of them, money is required. It offers a platform for relevant stakeholders, including other governments, international organizations, philanthropic entities, to contribute to this fund and help accelerate at the achievement of sustainable development goals in low and middle income countries. Sustainable development goals to eradicate hunger, to eradicate poverty, all these are sustainable development goals. And I just gave you an example of JAM Trinity in India, where we were able to not eradicate poverty but definitely reduce poverty. If we have reduced it, definitely one day we can eradicate it. India has pledged an initial commitment of $25 million in this fund. So by doing this, India will extend its, I would say, dominance over the global south, which is obviously going to help India. So this is it from today's session. We've covered 5 topics today, but most of them were factual. Now I will be meeting you tomorrow. The COP28 is coming, so maybe tomorrow or day after tomorrow's lecture will be focused on that. What can we expect from COP28 of UNFCCC? But till then, you guys keep studying, keep reading, keep writing, and most importantly, keep revising. Namaste. Jai Hind.